Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Second and Nine podcast. We're here with you today. It's Friday, November 15th. Tony D is actually on vacation right now, so we got Buffalo Phil back with us. Talk a little bit of football, talk a little Buffalo Bills, what's going on in the northern New York. What's going on, Phil?
Ray, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me back on. And, of course, Second and Nine fam. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, good to have you back. There's a few things to unpack from last week, but we got a weird situation last night in the Browns-Steelers game. You want to break that down a little bit for us? That little karate chop that we got from Myles Garrett, except the karate chop had a helmet in it.
Yeah, that was wild. It looked to me like, if you watch the replay from the 8 seconds left in the game, it's 21-7. The game's over. There's no need to pile drive the quarterback into the ground there, which is what Garrett did. And obviously, Rudolph's going to get frustrated at that, and the linemen are going to get frustrated at that. So it's going to be a little chippy after that. And then, Rudolph's helmet gets ripped off, and Rudolph should not have re-entered the scrum. He shouldn't have gone in there again with his lineman taking care of Garrett, and then Rudolph kind of goes in there. Yeah, obviously, no one deserves to get swung at with their helmet. That is incredibly foolish and ridiculous, and Myles Garrett deserves an indefinite suspension for sure. To swing at him with the helmet like that. But, there are a lot of guilty parties, and it was just a mess. You can't even blame Pouncey for punching and kicking Myles Garrett at that point, protecting Rudolph. And then the other guy, who was the guy that got the 1-game suspension, that came in running at the end and just took out Mason Rudolph. He's just standing there, and he just gets leveled from behind. It's completely unnecessary. It was a wild game, man.
Yeah, I think when one of those things happen like that, when the helmet swung like that, I feel like a lot of players, especially in football, look at it as like maybe a no holds bar, not necessarily like that, but it's like if he's going to go to that level to do something like that, it's not necessarily surprising to me that someone like Pouncey ended up giving he gave him a little bit of a kick in the head, like with the helmet on. I think it's a little bit. I don't want to say the action is overblown, but in terms of like the impact and how hard he tried to kick him, I mean, it's something like that's bound to happen. I think when someone's swinging around a helmet like that, hitting someone in the head without a helmet on, especially like the fact that Mason Rudolph went through that whole crazy concussion. Like, I don't know if you had seen that. I don't know how many weeks ago that was now, but I think that's the most like concerning thing about the situation, because these guys, some of them are having their lives affected like crazy after like their careers. And I mean, you can't be necessarily that reckless on the field. So
apparently he was fine. I think he got hit with like the soft portion of the helmet or the more flexible portion of the helmet as opposed to the top of the crown.
I think it was like the side like of the helmet, almost like under the ear.
Yeah.
When it hit him on the top of the head. So imagine if you would have hit him on the top of the helmet.
I know.
Could have been bad news.
Would have been bad. Yeah. Are you? What do you think about the suspensions handed out by the league? Do you agree with those? 3 games for Pouncey, indefinite for Myles Garrett, and the guy from I forget his name right now. The guy from the Browns that ran at the end and smacked Rudolph down, got a game.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. I think that type of action. I think it would be all right if they suspended him for like a year. I think that if they go past that, that would be a little bit too much. I don't know if
you mean the rest of.
I'm talking about like more of like a 16 game schedule.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, I can see that potentially happening, and I wouldn't necessarily be up in arms about it because it was pretty bad. But I think in that case, like even till end of this season, that could be punishment enough. But anywhere in between there, I think I would be fine with.
Yeah, I think he should at least get the season and maybe a game or 2 next season. Wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah. In terms of there was an actual football game that went on. It was kind of a little bit surprising to me, but not as much surprising just because like the Steelers, obviously they lose James Conner right in the beginning of that game. Juju's out.
Yeah.
So no weapons offensively to go against that team, and they looked a little anemic on offense. And I mean, I think it was like almost maybe not necessarily appropriate isn't the right word to use, but just like the way the game ended like that, it was just like a hot mess from both sides. It looks like both teams have been going through a lot of adversity this year, and it kind of all the frustrations builded, and then someone lost it a little bit. But in terms of play, I don't think that the Browns are necessarily in the clear in terms of becoming like a better team. I mean, they're not. We were talking about it before. They're not getting Odell involved nearly enough, and they just don't. Baker and Odell don't necessarily seem like they're on the same page, at least from what I'm seeing. So it's kind of tough to judge them going forward. They have had somewhat of a tough schedule, and they say that the schedule gets a little bit easier for them. But in terms of like a playoff run, I think it would be a little bit of a stretch at this point because you still got to beat the teams in front of them. You know, like when you're a 4-6 team, I think is what they are now. Like usually your record tells a story. So we'll see how much they can improve. I don't think that they're going to really improve that much offensively if Odell isn't getting involved at all, because they need a passing game. Because if they do have a passing game, I mean, we've seen it from Chubb. The kid can run, and he runs downhill. Like he punishes defenses, and when he's rolling and they passing game, that'd be tough.
I mean, they just got Kareem Hunt back too, and they're 2-0 with him. And you know, he's a threat to catch the ball out of the backfield too. I agree with you though. I don't see them as a playoff threat even in this jumbled AFC here. It seems like every week it just gets more and more jumbled. But yeah, those division games are always fierce, and I don't know if even the Steelers I think are on the outside looking into the playoffs too. I don't know if you get more than 2 teams in the playoffs from that division. I think you get the Ravens, and I don't think any of those other teams sneak in. But yeah, I mean, they're talented enough to play spoiler and win about 6 to 8 games. So
if you do take a look, I just brought up their schedule, and I'll actually share it real quick with the audience because they do have a pretty easy schedule coming up. They have potentially 5 wins on the schedule. Left out of the last 6 games. They got 2 of the Bengals. They're in Arizona. They're playing in Miami next week. They got the Steelers in Pittsburgh.
Right back to the Steelers, yeah.
And then you never know the way the season goes and the way teams are playing at times. Looks like week 16, the week right before Christmas, they're playing at home against Baltimore, which may not necessarily be a gimme game at that point for Baltimore. So, yeah, no, it looks like the upside is potentially 9 wins. I can't see them winning out because they'll probably lose that Ravens game. But, yeah, I don't know if 9 wins is going to do it this year, but the AFC is not necessarily the strongest.
Yeah. I mean, the Bengals got to win sometime, right? I don't know if the Bengals are going to go winless. So
I don't know. At this rate, it's possible. They're fighting for that first pick because, I mean, Miami looks like they're a little bit more concerned with showing decent play now versus the Bengals. I mean, one of my picks this week will, I think, be it definitely wasn't a teaser. The Raiders against the Bengals. The Raiders at home, you figure that they're gonna Josh Jacobs probably gonna run wild in that game, and Derek Carr probably have a nice game. I'm looking for Waller to have a bounce back game, but yeah, I don't
agree.
really.
But that line's at 11.5. Oh.
Yeah, that's
the Raiders historically at 11.5. That's tough, even against the Bengals.
No, it is a lot. It's actually moved because I think initially when I saw the line, it was 10.5. So it looks like money's going in bigly for the Raiders. But since we're having a conversation about the Browns, let's talk a little bit about that game last week. Now, I mostly saw highlights of that game like on Red Zone, a little bit of NFL Primetime. But you watched that game more in depth. Tell us a little bit about what happened in that game because it seemed like the Browns just kept shooting themselves in the foot. But talk us about your blues on offense that you've had.
Yeah, I mean, both teams shot themselves in the foot. I think what you're referring to is that Browns had 7, 8, or 9 plays at the 1 yard line in goal to go situations, and they could not get in. Even with a couple penalties to help him out, it was just run stuff, incomplete pass. They just couldn't get anything going. But yeah, that was a frustrating game if you're a Bills fan. So that was a frustrating game for no one listening except for me. Um, yeah, Hashke missed a 30. I think it was a 34-yard field goal, essentially an extra point. And then he missed that 50-something yarder at the end, which would have given them overtime. But yeah, I mean the D keeps getting gashed. I think it's ever since the Miami game in Philadelphia, they got gashed up the middle, and even against Adrian Peterson and the Redskins, they could not stop the run, and it was just more of the same. Nick Chubb ripped off a couple of long runs, and Kareem Hunt was catching some short passes out of the backfield. And the defense is, I think the defense is coming back to earth from their really good start to start the season, where they were turning the ball over, they were getting key stops. Now they're bending a little more. They're not breaking, but they are certainly bending a little more. And if you're not getting the help from the turnovers, I don't think Baker Mayfield turned the ball over. I don't think they had a turnover last game. So that definitely, and you're not going to win games if the Bills are playing like a average, slightly above average defense right now. The past few weeks, it's not the elite level that they were at the beginning of the season. And if you're playing like that, the offense is not going to win games because the offense has not looked good in a few weeks. I mean, obviously they beat the Redskins, but let's be real, it was the Redskins. Yeah, Josh Allen, to his credit, I think he's only thrown one interception in the past 4 or 5 weeks. He has fumbled a lot, but he's been playing much more conservative than the gunslinging stuff that he was doing in the beginning of the season. But no, they have issues. They got issues running the ball. They got issues moving the chains. They got issues converting on deep passes. I don't think every time they throw deep, it's just an overshot or it's out of bounds. It's not good. They got to get something going on offense. I don't know if it's force feeding Devin Singletary. I don't know what it is, but
I think that would be a good idea.
Allen.
I think it would be a good idea if they started running the ball a little bit more consistently. I mean, I think that one game, what was it, like 2 weeks ago? Frank Gore got stuffed at the goal line, I think 3 or 4 times in a row, and then
and he
had pronounced him dead apparently. So
Old Man Gore,
Old Man Gore, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. I still think he's good enough to get playing time, but I think Devin Singletary is actually a pretty good running back, and that's. I don't know why some of these teams, they kind of overthink things. They should be running they're another one of those teams that should be running somewhat of like an RPO offense, at least flashing it a little bit and working to the strengths of your quarterback. Because he's shown, as you said, he can't throw downfield. He's not accurate if he's throwing deep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, play more of like a ground and pound type like offense. I've said it for like the Giants, but this is more so for the Giants, for them to kind of give Danny Jones some different looks, like from defenses, to try and like play with the defense's mind and find like some open looks for guys, because the Giants have playmakers, but the Giants aren't as much of a fit of like the RPO offense as the Bills are, because I think Josh Allen fits perfectly in that type of offense.
Yeah, the problem with him is he fumbles too much. I think he's fumbled like 11 times this season. I think he's only lost about 3 of those, but still, it's just been fortunate for the lineman top jumping on the ball. But he's got to do him. He's a great runner. He does look great when they call those draw plays and when he's just breaking containment and he's just running around the outside the pocket when the pocket collapses, and sometimes he'll look great on the run and he can run it and throw it, but he gets a little reckless sometimes, and that ball comes out. He's got to do a much better job of hanging on to the football before I am confident with him running around that much. I'm not even concerned about him getting hurt. He's a big guy. I think he can take some hits, but his ball security is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it about Daniel Jones too on this podcast, so that's kind of why he was dubbed the name Danny Loose Change by Tony D, the Cowboys fan.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's I got into an argument with Tony D before about it being a correctable issue. I think it is. It's just got to be making more of a conscious effort to be paying attention to it. I mean, Tiki Barber did it and he's a running back.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. That's a position that you're taking a lot more hits. It's a lot more difficult to hold on to the ball every single time. So it's definitely something that they can both improve at. But the Bills are like one of those teams, I think, that somewhat similar to the Cowboys. They need to try to pound the ball on the ground. And you have some smaller receivers, albeit, but quick receivers and Cole Beasley and John Brown, that as long as they can get a step on a guy where the safeties or like the secondary maybe bite potentially, or the linebackers bite on like a fake handoff, like in an RPO type offense, you can find guys running easily wide open, like on slants or out routes, or even just flies, like if it's especially like in the slot, if a linebacker commits. So it's I don't know how much there is to say else like I guess on the Bills. They're kind of like a predictable team, but they're gonna play good pass defense and probably get gashed a little bit like on the ground defensively. But I think overall they've shown like a good ability to keep the other teams to a low score, even if they're getting gashed on the ground. They're keeping the other teams out of the end zone. So that's definitely a takeaway.
The red zone offense has been decent too, so they're good around the red zone. It's just
well, because they actually decide to run Josh Allen in some of those plays. They have him rolling out or running like one of those draw plays. But
exactly.
In terms of some of the other key games like from the week, the Giants-Jets game was absolutely abysmal to watch. So as a Giants fan, I told you earlier, they screwed me on my my entertainment bets that I had made. I had the Giants, that they were the only ones that I didn't cover on. But from that game, like a few of the like takeaways for me from the game. I mean, Daniel Jones put up numbers. He had 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards. So I mean, he played well in that sense. But the offensive line has just been – it's the same, I guess, similar to what you said about the Bills' run defense. They're getting gashed. The offensive line is just getting battered. And there are times where I understand, like, he has the fumbling problem and he's got to get the ball out quicker. Sometimes, though, it's like kind of hard to watch with how bad, like, the offensive line is collapsing. And then, like, Soldier got hurt in the game and it made it even worse. And the Giants had plenty of opportunities to win that game, but with the combination of the offensive line playing so poorly and Barkley getting 1 yard on however many carries he had, it wasn't his fault. And then plus the defense playing terrible and just getting gutted by Sam Darnold. It's not a bright future right now for a Giants fan.
Yeah, do you think that's your number one priority in the offseason, is to shore up that offensive line? Because you can if you protect Jones and you create some holes for Barkley, I think you guys can do something on offense as long as you shore up the line.
Yeah, I mean it depends on how they want to do it. I mean, they could have done it a few years ago with Andrew Whitworth. Tony D was the one that he had made that call initially, like when the Rams signed him. He's like, why aren't the Giants going after him? It was probably just because he was an older player, and it was a big miss on their part, because now they're committed to Nate Solder, who hasn't played well. He's getting paid a lot of money. So it's not necessarily looking like a great decision to not sign him. But I don't know. I have different viewpoints sometimes on drafts, because I think sometimes Barkley, yes, is probably going to end up, if he doesn't get hurt, he's a Hall of Fame type talent. But are you guys going to win games? I'm not crazy for saying that Barkley's like a Hall of Fame talent type player. I don't get chuckle over there.
Well, I think that's getting our head of ourselves. Wait, are you saying?
I'm saying talent. He hasn't put up numbers.
Okay.
He hasn't played long enough, obviously. But
okay.
I think he's a Hall of Fame talent. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and I don't know. Watching that game, the defense, or the offensive line, just not only like the pass offense, like I was alluding to before, to get 1 carry or 1 yard on all those carries for Barkley, every single time he got handed the ball, he was getting hit in the backfield. I haven't seen like a run blocking that bad in a while from any teams.
Yeah, the Jets were also coming off a disgusting loss to the winless. I think they were winless at the time, Dolphins, and it was all fire Gase, and I'm sure that and plus you're playing the crosstown rivals. I'm sure all that work the Jets up a little bit. So maybe I don't know. The Jets aren't very good either, and you still lost them. But
What do you
yeah,
think
not a
about what do you think about the coaching situation right now for both teams? Because we were talking about it last week. We did an episode with Dietz and Zaddy on Sunday talking about this game specifically, and I was already pretty much punting on Shermer and Gase. They weren't as necessarily as quick to do so, but I think it's been so horrendous, and I know it, like you can't go into hiring a situation where you're hiring a coach and have them gone in 2 years and think that that's a process where you're giving a fair shot to the coach to build like a legitimate team. But how bad
yeah.
these teams have looked, I think you can justify getting rid of both of them at the end of the year. And it's crazy enough for Gase because he's only won not even a season in yet.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets look like they're taking a page from the Knicks book and just if you get rid of an NFL coach in one season, I don't know like what you can.
I mean, they're not going to do it because like Chris Johnson just came out the other day and he had a press conference and said that he's our guy. We're going to go into the season next season with him as our coach. So
yeah, I mean,
I was looking at it like your opinion because I felt like I was on an island last week, but I mean it's been so bad to the point where it's at that sort of level where it's almost justifiable.
I mean, personally, I didn't see the Jets as a playoff team coming into the season. What are they 2-8? Like, they can finish. No, I don't think he's a good coach by any means, but I think if you blow it up after 1 year, I think you're probably shooting yourself in the foot because who are you gonna hire? If you're gonna hire someone, who are you gonna hire different this year that you wouldn't have gotten last offseason?
Mike McCarthy.
I mean, is he available?
He is. I think that they just weren't interested in him. I think that Gase made a really good impression on the Johnsons, and then they hire him, and then he gets McCagnon fired, and I mean that's already like dysfunction to begin with. But they had a chance to get McCarthy last year. McCarthy got let go by the Packers, so I thought that he was. I think one of our first episodes I talked about that too, where we were just talking about that situation. I thought that it could have been a decent fit at least. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of McCarthy, but I think with his way that he brought up Aaron Rodgers from like being a young player into like you could say he molded him or whatever. It's to anybody's discretion, but Rodgers turned into and blossomed into like a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback. And they have a young quarterback there in New York, like with the Jets. So it seemed like somewhat of a decent fit. At least it made more sense than Gase for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I think you have to stick with Gase this season. You can't next year would be Darnold's third year, and he'd have 3 different offensive systems. I don't think that that just puts the kid in a terrible position. I'm not a huge fan of him to begin with, but I think you have to at least. This is just my opinion. You have to at least try for some sort of continuity there, and you got to sort of ride the ship again next year. As far as Shermer, this is the second season, and you speak to it more than I do. But the what I've seen, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Shermer, and yeah, I think it wouldn't be crazy if they went the new head coach route next offseason, start fresh with Danny D.
Yeah, because I think that one of the highest priorities that I'll try and I guess make my point with this. One of the highest priorities that each of these teams should have is developing the young quarterback because that those types of players have on the franchises and on the teams. If you're in a situation where you're bringing these head coaches back and you have an inkling that they're not the solution in the future, and you hold on to them for an extra year, that's an extra year that you're losing with development of your quarterback, and then obviously the rest of your team and everyone having to learn like new systems and stuff when coaching staffs come in. So I mean, the change could be inevitable, and they could be just hitting the pause button on it right now, which could set them back. And that's one of the biggest concerns that I have because I kind of feel like that could be the case. I think Shermer is definitely on thinner ice than Gase at this point. But I don't really think that the Giants are gonna get rid of Shermer yet. at the end of the season. If they don't win another game the rest of the season and they go 2-14, then I can maybe see them pulling the trigger. But if they win like 5 games, I don't think that they're gonna get rid of him yet. I think they'll probably give him another shot.
Yeah, I think some of the teams get away from it. It's also good to have I know the Giants have it with Eli Manning, but a veteran backup there, just so a guy can, learn the ropes from. The Jets don't have that. They have Trevor Siemian and whoever their backup quarterback. But yeah, I think that's something that I think has gotten away from teams in recent years. There's throwing the young kids into the fire and letting them go. I'm a little more old school. I like to let them sit a little bit. Let them sit at
I
least
think it
half
kind
the
of
season
depends.
or
For me, I'm more of a proponent of just getting them out there. I think if they're good enough, then they'll be able to survive it, and they won't lose like their confidence permanently over it. I think the guys that are good ultimately are the ones that are the most resilient and hardest working. So I think they'll find a way in those cases. But the jury's still out on the 2 quarterbacks in New York, at least in New York City. Yeah, and I think also in New York State. But that's just me.
Who gets fired first, David Fizdale or one of the football coaches?
Let's not talk about the Knicks or anything to do with the Knicks because not only are they bad, but you also scared me out of that entertainment bet of their under for the season, 27 wins. That would have been the easiest entertainment in the world.
I was dead wrong. They look terrible.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But let's keep it moving though for this week's purposes, at least for breaking down games from last week. Did you end up watching that Seahawks game? Seahawks.
No, I didn't. But I was confident in the Seahawks going in there and at least losing by less than I think 6.5 was the line.
Yeah,
I think the Seahawks are better, but I think the Seahawks are probably the better team, and I don't know how long the 49ers can go undefeated. So yeah, it didn't surprise me, that result.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say the Seahawks are definitely a better team. I think that the 49ers probably outplayed them in that game, but the Seahawks made some of those key plays, like that Clowney strip sack and took for a touchdown. Obviously, those are game-changing plays. And the 49ers didn't really capitalize on some of their opportunities they had to really like close out that game. I was really frustrated at the end of the game. I don't know if you saw it. They went for it 3 downs in a row in overtime. I think with about, it must have been like 4 minutes left or so. They had it. Less than that actually. 3 times in a row, they do quick passes, 3 incompletions, and the clock's just stopped. And I think at this point we're under 2 minutes after 3rd down, and they ended up giving the ball back. And these guys, like the Seahawks, ended up finishing the game off like in overtime. So it was kind of frustrating to watch on the 49ers standpoint, because I know you hear all this whole mantra all the time of these guys, you need to play to win the game, like, as Herm Edwards famously said. But in this case, you could have hedged your bet a little bit with like the strategy that you could have gone in like with that last drive when they went 3 and out like that. Because if you run the ball on 1st down, you get the clock moving, and then just from that point on, I think they had 1 timeout left. The Seahawks really wouldn't have enough time if you ended up punting on that drive to drive all the way down the field and get like a field goal at the end, unless you completely botch the coverage. So if they do that, then they can at least guarantee themselves a tie. And considering it's a division rival and they don't like lose a game on the Seahawks, now the Seahawks are really only up a half or down a half a game by the 49ers. So it's I thought that was a little bit of a risky like call on their part, and I definitely would have made sure I ran off some of that clock on that last drive. So I think that was where that wasn't necessarily the only time that they or spot in the game that they lost the game, but because obviously the kicker missed his kick, but there was also like I think that situation was a problem for them, and I think that cost them the game.
Yeah, I mean the Seahawks, and at least the Seahawks have been there before in those bigger situations. 49ers are kind of bursting on the scene here. So it'll be interesting. Could be a playoff sort of preview. It was a huge game for home field advantage. But they look like they play each other again last week of the season. Be another interesting one there.
That will be interesting too, because it'll be in Seattle, and Seattle hasn't necessarily. I don't think they're calling their crowd the 12th man anymore, because they don't seem to have like a big time home field advantage. I think some of those fans went over to watch the soccer team for some reason, because I hear that crowd is like kind of rowdy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Seahawks are one of those teams that I actually. It's funny when I was talking to my dad about it, and I was like, the way that I see this game going is it's going to be like within a 3-point game at the end, and then Russell Wilson's going to get the ball with like 5 minutes left and end up scoring, putting up points. And then that was my reasoning behind taking the Seahawks and thinking that like they would cover that 6.5 point spread, which you, I, and Tony D took as like our picks this week. So at least we got one right, or at least I got one right.
Boom.
Yeah, boom. Yeah. But I think that it was a great game to watch, and it's gonna be interesting, like going into the second matchup, and then potentially maybe a playoff matchup, because as you said, one of these teams could potentially get the number 1 seed and the home field advantage throughout the rest of the playoffs. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and if they're both sitting there with playoff seeding that can't move in the last week, and how much do you even show your cards in the last game there of the season there? If it's not going to matter too much, it might be a backup game.
But with them only being down by a half a game, or I guess one game in the loss column, that could basically set the seedings and who's going to win the division, who's going to be a wild card. So
that's true too.
It all depends on how the rest of the games go. If those teams continue to win, it could be worth everything in terms of like the regular season crown.
Yeah, it could be huge too. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, all right. So that was one of the other games to touch on, and then the last one was Vikings-Cowboys, and this one was interesting because there were a lot of different factors and I guess storylines going into the game. I think one of them being that Kirk Cousins does not play well in prime time, and he has a terrible record in prime time, like night games, especially Sunday nights. He historically plays the best, obviously, 1 o'clock in Minnesota, but it's very telling how much his numbers drop off and his wins drop off when he's playing in prime time. And I mean, he showed up, and I criticized him I think last week a little bit. Tony D called me out on it, and yeah, he had a good game. I think that going forward and getting that 4th down rushing touchdown by Dalvin Cook that he got late in the game, obviously huge call to go for, and then huge play to punch in the end zone. But what did you necessarily see from this game from like either team? Like, or did that game change your mind about these teams? Because my mind, I think I think these teams are very even, so I can see it going maybe the other way, and the Cowboys beating them. And if they played 10 times, I could see it maybe being 5-5. I think they're pretty similar teams.
Yeah, well, that's what is that? 60% of the league, right? They're going to be between 6 wins and 9 wins, and it's all a matter of 1 play here, 2 plays there. It all these teams are really, really close. I'm not talking about the elite teams at the top, the Seahawks, Niners, Patriots, Ravens maybe, and then you have the bottom feeders, Redskins, Bengals, Jets, Giants, etc. And then like that whole lump of teams in the middle there. You can throw the Cowboys and the Vikings in there, the Eagles, the Bills. All these teams are the Steelers, probably Raiders. Very. What separates them and what makes them is really airtight, in my opinion. So like you said, the Vikings are 7-3 and the Cowboys are 5-4, but they're very. I think they're evenly matched, and the ball's just broken the Vikings way a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. Do you buy the Vikings, and are they as good as their 7-3 record, and do you think the Cowboys are better than their 5-4 record?
I think that they're probably right in between that. I think that the Cowboys are a little bit better than that record, and I think the Vikings. I think the Vikings potentially, that maybe you can consider them at some point as that 7-3 like win percentage type team. But they've shown inconsistencies at times too. Like I think these are teams that have like ups and downs throughout the season. I don't think that their teams necessarily on the, I guess, the higher end of the spectrum when it comes to the real contenders like for the Super Bowl. So I think that they're both potential playoff teams. Can compete wild card round and possibly divisional round if they get hot towards the end of the season. But I think ultimately they're not in like that upper echelon of teams.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Before we log off for the day, let's get your picks since you're on. You're the big the Bills homer fan. The Bills are as of right now on DraftKings 6.5-point favorite in Miami. Is this one of your games that you're picking this week?
This is a tough one. This is a really tough one. I'm gonna say yeah. I'm gonna take the Bills at -6.5.
Surprise.
I think the Fitz magic is going to run out. I can't see the Dolphins winning 3 in a row. Fitzpatrick's about to get the Fitz magic's going to run out. The interceptions are going to start to pile up. Bills coming off a really frustrating loss against a game that they would have been very, very helpful. I think they'll come out, and I think they'll come out strong against the Dolphins. So I'll take the Bills at -6.5. How about you? You want to touch that game or no?
Fair. I have not made my official picks for this week yet, and I don't think I'm
okay.
I got to look through I got to really think about all the other games in depth if I want to take this game, because this one is a really tough spread for me. Honestly, just looking at it firsthand, I would probably initial reaction take the Dolphins +6.5, just because I mean, they're at least on an uptrend right now, two games in a row, and the Bills haven't shown enough on offense for them to now let me consider them as a team that can cover 7 points in any given game, because they're just not scoring enough. So
I hear you.
Yeah, I think the Bills can and should win this game, but 6.5 points is not something that I'm confident in them at this point in time right now.
Oh, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up. The last thing I wanted to throw out there, and if you changed your mind from before we started recording, feel free to jump in and provide one. But one guy that a player I've been keeping my eye on a little bit in terms of like a future sleeper, a guy that I think can prove a lot as a player and potentially make like a big impact, and wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if at some point when his rookie deal is up, if he's not re-signed, I can see the New England Patriots picking him up in a heartbeat, and that's Hunter Renfrow. I think he was a guy that I mean, he obviously made that big play in the national championship game at Clemson, or that Deshaun Watson-led team, and he shows to me a guy that obviously works really hard and just follows and still utilizes like the fundamentals like of the game, whether that's like his footwork and his routes, making sure like he gets 2 hands on the ball when he's catching it, and he doesn't make any like stupid mental mistakes, at least from what I've seen so far. And I think he's got underrated quickness and agility too. I think he's a kid that obviously got good hands, and he seems like a guy that will end up in New England at some point, because he's that's the type of guy that Belichick breeds in that locker room, like the guy that does his job and has like really good fundamentals. But I kind of want to see him evolve a little bit more in this offense, because this offense could turn into a pretty interesting one, especially not only do they have like all these other guys, they're moving to Las Vegas. They're going to be playing on turf indoors. So like they can take advantage of like some of the speed that they have, because maybe Josh Jacobs isn't necessarily a speed guy, but Darren Waller's a freak that I've talked about a lot. I think
you are all about these guys.
About
Raiders weapons here.
No, but the funniest part is that Tony D was the one that before any of this happened, before they had this draft, and they've really evolved into this sort of team right now. They still have a lot to prove, but one of our closing statements for the year, as we wound down like the last season when we started the podcast, was, for me, it was Mahomes. Obviously, that was a storyline, and he wanted to talk about the Raiders and how they were, how he likes how their future is shaping up. Even though they gave away Khalil Mack, or they traded him for a lot, they got a lot for him. I mean, Gruden has showed so far that he's starting to mold this team and starting them like with a lot of young players, a lot of young talent. I think it's a recipe for a potential good team. So I think it's something to keep an eye on, because I think if Carr continues to develop, he's going to start to have weapons now. And if they can either draft or maybe get another receiver in free agency, they'll have a pretty loaded offense. Because I think with Waller and Renfro playing on the inside, you got a bigger receiver on the outside. The offense could be looking pretty good.
Well, John Gruden also likes Nate Peterman, so let's hold off on that. John Gruden.
You revived Nate Peterman's career. I'm assuming you watched Hard Knocks.
Enough to know that he likes Nate Peterman.
Yeah, he did. Full disclosure.
Spoiler alert. You know who would be you were saying Hunter Renfrow would be a good Patriots wide receiver. You know who would be a great New England Patriot wide receiver? It looks like a guy that Tom Brady would throw to and catch 100 passes a game. Brett Gardner, the New York Yankees.
Brett Gardner, yeah, I could definitely see that. That's a decent comparison. That's actually pretty funny. But I mean, am I saying anything out of school? I think Renfro looks he fits the mold with the same type of players. But I think he can flourish with the Raiders. They're a run heavy offense, but he's one of those reliable guys that he seems like a guy that can develop into one of those players that can get you like first downs on key third downs and keep the chains moving. So it's I think I've seen enough. There were at certain points when I've seen him in the past, it was kind of like I wasn't fully convinced. I thought maybe there was something there, but I'm starting to see it more. I mean, obviously he's making more plays now, so it's I think going into next year he could be a guy to take the leap in terms of like
you heard it here first. 2nd and 9, Sam.
I'm sure someone else has said it before, but I guess I'm drinking the Raiders Kool-Aid.
Not to be confused with the San Diego Padres right corner outfielder Hunter Renfrow, the exact same name.
Hunter Renfrow. Baseball reference.
Yeah, a Renfrence. Let me sneak in some more picks because you kind of cut me off. I'm gonna take the Dallas Cowboys -6.5 against the Detroit Lions. Matt Stafford's out. The Cowboys just came off a tough loss, and next week the Cowboys looking ahead to play New England. I think the Cowboys need this game, so I think the Cowboys are going to come and cover that 6.5 points. I'm going to also take the New York Jets +2.5. The Redskins are terrible. I'm going to take the New England Patriots -4 against the Eagles. Patriots coming off a bye and a loss. Eagles coming off a bye too, and that's in Philly. But I don't think New England's losing 2 in a row, especially off the bye. And do I have one more pick? Did we do?
That's 5. That's 4 so far.
That's 4. All right. Well, I will give you right before we sign off the
show prep for this show is incredible.
Jacksonville Jaguars +2.5 against Indianapolis.
You do know that Jacoby Brissett's playing, right?
Do know that Nick Foles is playing? Jacksonville will not be the Minshew team anymore. So let's see. It'll be interesting to see this new look. We'll see how they can do. I'm going to take the Jaguars +2.5. Colts, as I said before we went on, every game, lose or win, tight ball game.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's that's why we have you on. We bring you that in-depth Buffalo as well as Indianapolis insight. So yeah. Thank you for that. I'll keep that in mind when I'm placing my entertainment bets. Just entertainment only.
Keep in mind, Brett Gardner looks like a Patriots wide receiver.
that is, I think that's a quote from the 2nd and 9 fam going into the podcast universe. But I think that's it for us for tonight, and we'll be back on Sunday with Tony D to preview like the rest of the games, do our picks. But I guess until then, thank you, Buffalo Phil, for joining. We're signing off from 2nd and 9. We'll have a good weekend. Talk to you on Sunday.
Later, guys.